Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I'm so excited to have Philip Pape on the show. He is an evidence-based nutrition coach, founder of Fitness Lab app, and the host of the Wits Weights Podcast, which has surpassed 1 million downloads across 500 episodes. Known as the physique engineer, he applies a systems thinking approach to help adults over 40, especially women in peri and postmenopause, build muscle, lose fat without restrictive diets or excessive cardio. Philip, welcome. You are speaking my language. This is exactly my jam. I also hate the idea of women, especially in peri and postmenopause, jumping into this idea that in order to lose weight or change body composition, that they absolutely have to restrict everything they put in their mouth or become cardio queens. That's how I like to describe that. So tell me how you became so passionate about this. So tell me how you got started.
Yeah, I love women. My wife is that age range. And what happened is when I got into this space, I would say 80% of the people that came to me were women. And I think it really comes down to what you've alluded to and talk about on your show, in that there's a lot of frustration as we get older. We see it with men and women, but women, it gets exacerbated because of the lifestyle combined with other aspects of physiology and biology like hormones. And there's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of marketing to those fears. There's a lot of dieting culture, the diet culture, the weight loss culture, the being skinny. And so early on, when I launched my podcast, it was all about strength, getting stronger, building yourself up to be, a well-fueled athlete of aging. And I think that resonates with a lot of people who are like, you know what, I would rather be eating more food, lifting, quote unquote, heavy. We can talk about what that is, but, lifting for strength, being a strong, functional person who, we're parents, we have kids to take care of. We don't want to have those energy crashes every day. We want to be able to sleep. We want to have a good sex drive, like all that stuff. And it just resonated at this age range. And then I started hearing the supplements and the hormones and all the other language around quick fixes and shortcuts and things. I see, there's got to be another way. So for me, it was just a natural process of talking about what I love, what I do personally, and then women and men, but again, about 80% of who I work with is women, saying, hey, I like the idea of treating my body as this, so this, I don't want to say problem, but it's solvable if we can find the constraints for me and help me do that. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot view.
I love that. So, okay, let's dive in. How do you find the constraints? Like, what is your process when a woman comes to you and says, this is what women say to me. So maybe if they don't say this to you, I'm 45 and now I just have all this belly fat that I never had before. Nothing in my life has changed. I work out, I eat well, I get my steps, I do Pilates, I sleep good, I'm doing all the things, but it just won't budge. Tell me what your process looks like.
Yeah, that's exactly what I hear to it. It's like, and cellulite, is there a way to get rid of it? And, this is, right. It's like these very specific micro problems. And usually it comes down to the basics, but I like to treat this as a feedback loop. You talk about signals. I think I forget the language you use. I've been listening to your show a lot more lately. And you talk about really listening to the signals and the feedback about how your metabolism is functioning. Because at the end of the day, as much as people like to talk about energy balance and macros and calories, that's the end of the chain. That's the end of the link. That's like the lagging indicator of what's going on. It's like you don't try to make more money for your job. You try to improve your skills and do a good job to get more money. So similarly with your body, you have to say, okay, why is my gut bloated all the time and I'm having poor bowel movements, right? Why do I never want to sleep with my husband? Why do I always crash at 3 p.m. every day, even though I feel like I'm eating enough? And why am I stuck at 1,200 calories? And some people are telling me I have to eat more, but I'm trying to lose fat or lose weight. But if I go the other way, it's too restrictive. What the heck do I do? And I'm not answering your question yet, but the answer is we need to figure out who you are, how you perform, your signals by measuring the right things, and then taking that feedback to change the behaviors. But it's not about the behaviors, it's about the identity that leads to expressing those behaviors. So again, that's really high level. We could talk about like what an intake looks like, what data we do measure, what the behaviors look like that tie into that. But it's really the feedback loop to figure out your body.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about data. I am a data person. I am a data geek. Like, honestly, for me personally, and what I try to teach my women is that we need to disconnect sort of this emotional piece when data comes into play. Like, data is data. So, like you said, macros is last, and macros is last in my world as well. Like, we need to fix fix, not being the problem, but just for naming it, all this other stuff first based on some data. And then we go even deeper as as you want to get closer and closer to your goals. So tell me what data you use.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, data removes guesswork is the way I like to say it. If you want a faster result, which is nothing wrong with wanting something more quickly or efficiently, I would say, not in the wrong way, but in the right way, you have to have, what you can't measure, you can't manage, right? So we've got quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative numbers, where the buck always stops with people is at the scale. Sometimes I joke that you could literally take out scale weight and add in better numbers and get the exact same result, and then the scale moves. But those would be things like the trend in your scale weight, but also your body measurements and your strength. To me, strength in the gym, progress in the gym is one of the best indicators. If you had nothing else, that would tell you that you're getting stronger and building muscle if your goal is to improve your body composition. Then we have our signals that we talked about, biofeedback. The biggest one to me is hunger. By far, the more and more I look into this, the more GLP-1s become part of the conversation, the more I've studied brain-related appetite genetics, all the hunger hormones you talk about, like leptin, ghrelin, PYY, CKK, all this stuff in your gut, as well as the relationship between hunger and things like food volume and nutrient density, things like meal timing, things like the restrictive diets themselves exacerbating the hunger, loss of muscle. I can go on and on and on, but in other words, hunger alone can tell you a lot of things that are essentially quantitative, even though it's kind of qualitative in the short term, it becomes quantitative long term. Your energy, which is like not just how you feel in general, but your lethargy at different times of the day, how you feel based on what you're doing and what you're eating, how that connects to your sleep and how that connects to your cycle as well for women. The sleep is a huge one. Of course, we can get into mood, recovery. Okay, mood. Let's talk about that. Anxiety, stress. If you go to menopause.org, right, which I think is a menopause society, you look up symptoms of peri and postmenopause, right? You get a list of about 30, 30 or 40. I forget what the whole list is, right? But everything from mood swings and vaginal dryness to, I mean, you know the list, right? My mind's blanking out. But taking those as well, those are symptoms which normally you'd put into a healthcare context, but can also be in a metabolic or metabolism discussion as well. Because, hey, what if we can fix a lot of the things that are under control today without even considering HRT or anything else, and get that list down to like 2, instead of 20. And then those 2 may give us more targeted interventions. Things like emotional cravings, things like your stress. So all of that is what I mean by data.
Love that. You said so much there. My brain is going
it's
like,
a lot. It's a lot.
I love that you said menopause symptoms. It can be looked at medically, or it could be looked at metabolically. And I wish, and I'm going to say this with all due respect, I wish that more women understood that the idea of menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, whatever, after 40, menopause is not the excuse for feeling like crap. Like you said, if we look at it as a metabolic issue. So women in their 40s, let's just say, bloating, struggling with weight loss, mood swings, low libido, anxiety, brain fog, losing their words mid-sentence, can't get thoughts out of their mouth, snapping on their kids, irritability. I mean, we could go on and on. If you just start addressing it from a metabolic standpoint, now in my world, that's literally looking at gut microbiome. That is literally looking at hunger hormones, looking at stress hormones, looking at how you recover, looking at what you're putting into your body and expecting what the input you're doing and expecting a different output, right? On top of what are you doing for movement? And like you said, if you can reduce that down to 2 symptoms, like you are already way further ahead of every woman in their 40s who only go, I'm in menopause, so this is just the way it is now. Like,
Yeah,
incredible.
exactly. Yeah.
I also like to say for like measurements of data, and it's a bit cheeky, but I like to say if you are not happy, hungry, or horny, something is going on metabolically. Like, those are 3 very basic, very down to kind of the Neanderthal in us all. If you are not those 3 things on a regular basis, you can deep dive into what's going on metabolically. And there are so many ways to address it.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know if this challenges a little bit about the functional space, but I do see people trying to diagnose the symptoms and then follow the symptom all the way to a fix rather than say, you know what, I have so many different symptoms that could be multifactorial here. And I know I'm not doing the basic things that just evolution and years of evidence show us are helpful, like strength training, lifting weights, like moving and not sitting all day, very simple things. And if we're honest with ourselves and know that we're not doing those, and those are the big rocks, and just put those in place. And we're not talking about you need years. You could spend 45 days to 2 months putting these practices in place, see what changes. That's what I always say to people. When someone asks, will this work for me? I say, I don't know. Let's see what changes. Let's experiment. Let's add that banana before you work out. Don't make any other changes to your variables and see what changes. And that's really, really powerful, because then you can say, okay, I still have energy crashes and I'm eating enough. I'm training, I'm sleeping enough. I even did what you said about, eating more protein for breakfast, whatever, and it's still happening. That gives you better data to target in on another more complex solution, which could involve, nutrient sufficiencies with supplementation. It could involve hormone therapy, could involve something else.
For sure. I like that you challenge the functional medicine space. I didn't actually feel like that was a challenge. I think that I agree with you. The functional medicine space has become a little bit pill for every ill.
Mhm.
Like very much like the conventional medicine space. That is not how I work. I really actually hate that model. And it's not what functional medicine is supposed to be. Functional medicine is supposed to be very holistic. It's supposed to be your body is one system. It all interacts together. Looking at one marker on a lab test is not like, hey, your thyroid looks suboptimal. Let's just focus on thyroid. No, well, why is your thyroid suboptimal? You know what I mean? And kind of go down that pattern. And I love what you said about the basics. And I love what you said about getting honest about the basics. There is so much noise around like biohacking, GLP-1s, and I'm not necessarily against any of those things. But those things only work to their best ability when you are doing the basics over and over and over and over and over again. And my husband and I talk about it. So we just had twins, and life has been pretty chaotic for the last 5 months, as you can imagine. And both of us talked about like, okay, before we, you know, buy some new piece of equipment for our gym, or, we can get lost in it too. Both of us, like, we get real and we go, let's just get our basics down again. Like, it's been a while since we have been consistently moving our bodies. It's been a while since we've had, meal prep. We've had people bringing food over and we don't have a ton of control of it. We certainly aren't sleeping. So I just feel like when you prioritize those basics over and over and over again, they not only become phenomenal foundational habits, but they become like what you always go back to, trusting that you will always go back to those. Like they are just imprinted in you if you just keep that consistent.
Yeah, I think there's layers of complexity, and we always jump to the highest complexity thing, or like you just alluded to, because I'm a parent as well, and I get it. It's very disruptive in many of the best ways, to be honest. And you forget, or you change your environment changes, or your life changes in a way it takes you off of that original path, and you kind of forget you need to get back to those things. So one thing you just alluded to was what I like, which is identity-based change, where what's her name? Dr. Karen, I forget her last name, Karin. You might know her. She's a researcher that looks at habits and is a big fan of saying that, look, habits are the things that happen automatically. What we're talking about here is identity and behavior, and then make decisions align with that, and then accumulate the evidence that that identity is real, right? And I think that's where a lot of this comes together, where a coach or a community or something can help you get to that point. In other words, it takes work. I hate to come on a podcast and be like, it's not easy. It takes work, and habits aren't, these old things don't become automatic. Like I don't lift weights automatically. It's actually a whole system I've put in place that's aligned with my identity. And then it just kind of happens because I've taken all the friction out. But anyway, I don't know if I went off on a tangent, but that's my thoughts on the matter.
I love a tangent. I think that that's absolutely correct. I think that we would be crazy. Like, what is the definition of insanity? Is doing the same thing over and over again and not seeing any results. I think that we would be crazy to like not really get honest with ourselves and go, it is hard work. Anytime you're going to go to a quick fix, anytime you're going to, jump the line, it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be what you want long term. It might be what you want for your vacation in 2 weeks. but like you're going to be back at the starting line again, and you're going to continuously be in this cycle. Statistically, they say 90% of women diet to lose fat at some point in their life. I would say 100% of the women that I work with have been in a diet loop from the age of 17.
Yeah, I think, yeah, another statistic related to that is like the average woman tries over 100 diets in their life, something like that. And you know what's funny about these discussions is we're talking about women, and there's an interesting comparison between men and women where, for example, like men get a big beer gut, you know, when they get older, but they can kind of like get away with it, so to speak, whereas women, like, because of society and pressure and their own expectations, can't like get away with those things as much, right? So it's even exacerbates taking the quick fix and being more, I'll say, desperate to do those things. And then when someone comes to me and says, well, I have cellulite, what can I do about it? I say, well, cellulite itself is kind of genetic, and let's focus more on other things that will make you feel good every day for the rest of your life. What are those things that align with the lifestyle and identity that will improve your physique? You kind of have to tie the two together, because it's okay to chase vanity as one micro goal of many goals, but it has to ultimately align with longevity and sustainability here.
I agree. I will tell you that I have a bit of vanity in me. I don't want to be the 50-year-old woman on the beach that can't wear a bikini and look great in it. But there's also a part of me that doesn't want to be a 50-year-old woman and can't run around with her kids. You know, longevity is super important. Do you think that there is a trade-off in some cases? So, you know, maybe somebody has that last 10 pounds they want to lose, but they also are not like really willing to give up. Like you talk about no restriction. They're not willing to give up their lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that they have an unhealthy lifestyle. They're generally healthy. Is there somewhere in there that maybe they restrict for a period of time, get their body composition to where they want to be, get their strength, their metabolism is burning, and then they can start inputting, you know, some of these lifestyle pieces, a glass of wine, some dessert, you know, that kind of stuff. Maybe they're more metabolically flexible at some point.
Oh, 100%. Right from day one, I always ask people, first of all, what are their non-negotiables, just to kind of get in their head of, you know, what they really cling to. And sometimes non-negotiables are silly things that are like, okay, cool. You like, you know, a specific type of fruit or something like that. And in other cases that they have to have the glass of wine, they'll say, okay, let's see if we can plan those in even from day one. Like I'm not, there's somebody I had on my show, Dr. Glenn Livingston, like his model is, you know, give yourself some hard restrictive rules specific to one thing that's like the biggest trigger, but you still have a ton of flexibility around that. And that's kind of where I think about it. It's like you're not depriving yourself in a way that process is unsustainable. You are giving yourself guardrails and structure that within that you have enough flexibility where you psychologically feel safe and your body feels safe to continue doing that. And so when you talk about fat loss and going into a calorie deficit, whether you are tracking calories or not, there's going to be some discomfort with that. I think you alluded to that. There's going to be some discomfort, maybe a little bit of hunger, a little bit of emotional desire for things that aren't quite there. And so you have to figure out a way to make it sustainable. And for everybody, that's different. It could be, okay, I'm going to take longer to do this. It could be, I'm going to do it faster, but like, you know, get it over with and do it more aggressively and everything in between. It could be, flexing it around your cycle, flexing it around your week, your weekends, like all of these things, there's nonlinear approaches, and that's where the personalization piece comes in. So to answer your question is, I'm a huge fan of flexibility in all its forms. I never tell people we have to restrict anything, but if you want to get to a goal like fat loss, there are certain numbers and data we've got to ultimately satisfy, and we want to do it in a sustainable way for you.
I love that. Okay, so you did just briefly mention potentially creating your, maybe you were talking about workouts, maybe you were talking about nutrition around a woman's cycle. So, two questions there. Do you think men and women need to train differently in order to achieve the results that are desired? And then how do you work that around like menopause when cycles are all over the place or potentially not existent?
Okay. The general answer is no, believe it or not. I think the evidence supports that individual variance between people is more than variances between genders on average. In other words, you need to know the person and their response to volume. Even if a woman with a cycle, like the vast majority of women I work with, don't have to change much because of it. And when they do have to change things, it's more food related because of hunger, right? They need to add a little more calories in the, what am I trying to say? The luteal phase, right? Sometimes I get them backward, but a little more calories in that phase and less in the other. As far as training goes, it really comes down to how you feel and your symptoms. Are you able to train hard and recover? Recoverability to me is number one, because recoverability, the ability to sleep, rest, digest, take your food and turn it into muscle is the driving factor, not necessarily the time in the gym. It's both, but it's definitely the other side. So when I work with men and women, I want them to tell me how they feel after a gym session. How do they feel the next day? How sore are they? Are they training faster or not? You know, do we need a higher or lower volume program? Do we need more or less frequency? Some people thrive better at 6 days with really short sessions versus 3 days and really long sessions. I with kids, like I like fewer days a week just so I can sleep on the other days. You know what I mean?
I get
So there's different, to answer your question, I think the cycle based stuff is overblown on social media, and that it's very individual.
I love that. I love that. I also think that, and you can tell me how you feel about this, and this is going to ruffle some feathers, I'm sure, in my world. I like Pilates. Don't get me wrong. I love all kinds of workouts and I dabble in all kinds of things, but your body will, like, strength training is where it's at. For women, I'm not going to speak for men. For women, building that muscle, feeling strong. I'm not talking about looking like a bodybuilder when I say that, but like developing strength in your body is not going to happen from doing some yoga. And I'm not saying yoga is bad. I am a big proponent for whatever movement feels good for you. But strength training is where it's at. That is where you're going to see the results. That's how your metabolism is going to boost. That's how for me, that is like the clarity in my brain comes from. That's where my creativity is sparked, is time in the gym, even if it's 4 days a week, 20 minutes a day.
Let me tell you, I am 100%, 1,000% aligned. My next program is actually going to be called Eat More, Lift Heavy, because I just want to lean into that, like for men and women. And I know women are going to love it because lifting weights, I mean, half the episodes I do are about how lifting weights increases your testosterone and regulates your hormones, how lifting weights improves insulin sensitivity, how lifting weights lets you eat more carbs, how lifting weights helps with back and joint pain. And I can go on and on. How lifting weights increases bone density if you're worried about osteoporosis, ladies. How lifting weights improves your energy and your cortisol curve and stress. I can go on and on. It literally is the unlock for almost everything that ails you as like the low hanging fruit. So if you're not even doing that, I agree with Michelle. What she's saying is like, I would not even care about anything else. Let's get you lifting weights, step one, and then we'll start layering in the other stuff.
I love that. I think that a lot of women are concerned about the idea of lifting heavy. So let's talk a little bit about that. Now, you and I know that's bio-individual. Obviously, where somebody starts is where somebody starts. It's the very beginning of their journey. Obviously heavy for them versus heavy for me might be very different. But tell me a little bit about this idea and like maybe myth bust a little bit about
Yeah, sure.
lifting heavy for women.
Yeah, I put lifting heavy into two buckets. There's lifting truly heavy relative to your capability. And then there's lifting to train hard to build muscle. So I kind of put those in two categories. So let's start with the first one, because a beginner who's never lifted properly before, which is probably 90% of you, sorry, should be building strength, because strength is the most efficient way to improve all the fitness factors we talked about, including muscle, because you can't have more muscle without more strength. You can't have more strength without more muscle. It's fairly well correlated for a beginner. And so the best and most efficient way to do that is big full body movements, compound lifts like squats and deadlifts and presses and rows. And I'm okay if you want to use machines or you want to do RDLs versus deadlifts, whatever. It doesn't matter. The fact you're using those movement patterns, because the movement patterns will recruit all the muscles, and the deeper muscle fibers will be recruited the heavier it is. What does heavy mean? Well, if I had you do something with good form right now, warm up first, and then do a few light sets, and then get heavier and heavier, and then go for your 1 rep max, your 1 RM that you could possibly do. Maybe it's a grind, but that's it. 1 rep max. That is the heaviest you can lift for one. It might be 10 pounds of whatever we're talking about, or it might be 400 pounds. It's relative to your strength. Now, you take that number, and if you can be over, say, 60% of that, you're probably going to build strength over time. If you're under 60%, but still over, say, 30%, which means you're not just lifting feathers, you're going to build muscle. So this is why I like beginners to stay in that upper regime, which looks like as low as say 4 to 6 or 8 reps, as opposed to 10, 15, 20 reps, and do that for the first 3 to 6 months. We can get into programming and all that, but that's the general principle of it when I say heavy. So if you can lift, if you can squat for 5 reps and you can maybe do 1 or 2 more, that's heavy. If you can squat for 5 and do 5 more or 10 more, that's not quite as heavy. And the reason this is so great is it's time efficient. You're going to build strength and muscle. You're going to be able to go up in weight pretty quickly over the next few months and get very functionally strong. You're going to probably notice some joint pain and back pain go away when you do that with good form. And then it'll set you the next phase where it starts to split off into like, I'm going to do bodybuilding or physique development or specialization or whatever. And then you get more flexibility, I'll say. The other thing about strengths, forgot to mention this, is osteoporosis. Like we know in the research that I think it's above 80% of your 1 rep max is necessary to fully hold on to your bone density at where it is today. And then you need impact work to grow new bone if you're like trying to reverse osteoporosis.
Amazing. Upward. Okay. So let's say I'm looking to prevent osteoporosis. If I'm working out 3 days a week, are you saying that I should be lifting over 80% of my 1 rep max 3 days a week for every lift?
Absolutely. No, not necessarily for every lift, but as a beginner, it would equate to that. If you want to save time, do it in like 40 minutes, and have as few exercises as possible and get the biggest bang for your buck. Because everybody listening is stressed out of their mind and busy, right? So I want to be time efficient with it. But if you go in and do curls and you do press downs, you do all these other like isolated movements, you'd have to cobble together like 12 of those to get this even close to potentially the same effect.
Amazing. Okay. So 2 questions again. I just don't want to forget them as we go into the conversation. What about women who only have access to weights at home? Maybe they're moms with young kids. I'm very fortunate to have a full gym in my basement. Priorities, right? But what if they only have a couple of sets of dumbbells? Like, are they totally lost on this train for strength training?
You got to start somewhere anyway. So if you could, step 1, get the movement patterns down, even body weight, that's step 1. Then you want to load them. And that's where your situation is going to limit yourself if you do it the right way. If you do it the right way and you're going up in weight and you only have 10-pound dumbbells, by week 3, you can't go anywhere other than way more reps or doing something funky like changing the leverages or gravity or, doing weird angles and stuff, right? So yes, and it's always a yes. And if you want to keep making progress, you've got to have the tools to make progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And so what about this other thought? This is something I come up against a lot, and I have for 17 years. If somebody is not drenched in sweat, completely exhausted, lay on the floor, at the end of their workout, it's not an effective workout.
For my clients, I want them to be that way. I want them to be questioning why they're not sore. Because there's a couple of things. First, if you are using the same movements from session to session, your body will adapt to those movements very quickly. It's the neuromuscular adaptation. And then you pretty much won't get sore from those movements, like not nearly as sore. Secondly, if you're not sore, it tells me that you're probably eating and sleeping enough as well. So the only exception being if a movement is fairly new, or it's very high reps, like on eccentric type work, like you're constantly rotating around or doing circuit style training, you still might be sore and it could be an effective workout, but don't chase soreness. Don't chase sweat. If you do what we talked about for a beginner program, you probably won't be sore after like week 2, but what you will be is stronger and you'll have more muscle. So you tell me what you want.
But is there ever a time where a more cardiovascular workout, and for those listening, whether that's HIIT, the Orange Theory style, I will say CrossFit, although CrossFit is pretty phenomenal for strength. They just do it together, and we don't even have to go down a CrossFit tangent. There's some things there I don't know.
I did CrossFit for 8 years, so I can go down that tangent, but yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
They tend to do it together, but I love that they have big movements. I love that they're functional. I just want it to be more appropriate for the beginner, right? That's my only thing on it. And then there's like traditional cardio, running, elliptical, if you're talking about in the gym or outside of. Is there a place where cardio backfires?
Yeah. So by the time this episode comes out, 2 of my recent episodes are actually about cardio. One is about all the science that links lifting weights to cardiovascular improvements just by itself, which is incredible. Like the amount of benefit you get for your heart and longevity just from lifting is like a huge step change compared to being sedentary, to where not adding much more cardio beyond that will give you the whole package. So that's one. And then the other episode I'm doing is about how to balance lifting and cardio because of this exact question. People coming from F45 and Orange Theory and all that. So I always like to say, look, you've got to make trade-offs and you've got to have goals, and what you do has to align with the goal. And you can make trade-offs if you're okay with a longer time horizon for your goal, less effectiveness on your goal, or because your goal is to do those things every day and that's how you love to live, right? So cardio is like a stack. In my opinion, lifting is number one, and that's going to give you a lot of cardio benefits. And then walking is number two, because walking is correlated with all-cause mortality really incredibly once you get up to about 7,000 steps a day or more. And that's for any activity. Metabolic equivalent could be biking, walking, swimming, doesn't matter. Standing up, chores, blah, blah, blah. So I would say getting walking in before you add more cardio. And then I would say it depends on your recoverability and your stress. That's really what it comes at. Even if you enjoy your boot camp classes, if it's stressing you the heck out and you're not recovering, and then you're exacerbating that when you go to the gym, like, what's the point? So, like, if you're in a fat loss phase, you might have to do less or more of a certain type of cardio than if you're not. My favorite form of cardio these days is sprinting, and I call it anabolic sprinting, not HIIT sprinting, not Tabata style, but a specific protocol I learned from Brad Kearns, who co-wrote the book with Mark Sisson about walking not long ago. And what it looks like is 4 to 8 sets of 10 to 20 seconds all out with 6 times recovery. That's it. 4 to 8 sets, 10 to 20 seconds all out, like you're Superman, like, or Superwoman, right? It feels great. And you rest 6 times the amount that you run. And the reason I love that, it's highly recoverable. It gives you the VO2 max benefits. It gives you the heart rate benefits, the heart rate recovery benefits. We should talk about heart rate recovery, by the way. Super easy metric to use. And it takes less time and it supports your lifting and recovery. Beyond that, I would say once or twice a week for half an hour of any type of cardio is not going to totally kill your gains.
Okay, not going to totally kill your gains. Love that. You did touch on stress. So let's talk about stress, because the women that come to me are highly stressed and don't even realize it. You know, very few women will say, I live a very high stress life. But then you get talking and they're like, you know, their career is number one. They've got kids in different schools and all kinds of activities, and they're not sleeping great, and their marriage is, you know, it's fine, but maybe it's not great. You know, they've got some stuff going on inside of their bodies, gut issues, hormone issues. These are all things causing stress. And then you add on the brain saying, I need to lose weight. You know, I want to feel better. And the only way I know how to do that is to diet and exercise. So I'm going to get biggest bang for my buck. I'm going to my boot camp class and I'm going to do 45 minutes of HIIT style training. How can we, and they don't notice that that's the stressor, right? They think they're doing all the things right. So how can we quantify or measure the stress load that choice of going to that F45 class might actually have on you? Because whenever I say anything about F45 on social media, I get tons of DMs. I feel great after my workout. You know, cool. You might have like this really glorious cortisol spike that makes you feel freaking incredible. And yeah, okay, cool. But is it sustainable? Is it actually doing good? So do you have any advice on that? What's a measurable tool to be like, is this actually working for me?
Stress is a very complicated subject. And I want to acknowledge that, right? For the listener, this is why it gets conflated. So if we really take a step back and think about our body, we have systems in our body, things that we easily understand are muscles and skeleton, bone, right? We even understand the brain a tiny bit. Stress is tied to the nervous system, and that is the big mystery to people. Okay. And it's interesting because Eastern medicine has actually studied it perhaps a lot longer and have some concepts that we think of woo as like meridians and all that kind of interesting stuff. But our understanding of the nervous system is often tied to like brain science, which just blows people's minds. And we're like, what's going on? So to me, when you think of calories in, calories out, the calories outside of the equation, your metabolism, is stress related. It's everything you do and eat and see and say and interact with in life as a human being affects that stress level, right? So I think of it as like this metabolic stack. And I know you talk about metabolism all the time. So rather than try to say, I'm measuring my HRV because that's a good indicator of stress, and you do that and you're like, so what the fuck do I do about it? Like, pardon, I said I wouldn't swear, but here I am. And you're
Don't
like,
hold back.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, what do I do about it? Going back to our earlier part of our conversation, the data is just the lagging indicator, right? It's telling you what's happening. I think the process related aspects of stress, like the movement or the biofeedback and what it's telling you about your energy and your mood, your libido, your hunger, and all of that are actually better indicators of stress than any sort of like numeric metric on a wearable, to kind of just briefly answer your question. But then you have to consider this. So women, and this is maybe a sexist type statement, but I see a lot of generalities. There's much higher cases of anxiety among females. And a lot of it is from perceived stress or psychological stress, we call it, right? Which is how you react to things. Okay. And I'm not going to get into talking about PMS and all this other stuff, but there are some correlations we see where a woman and a man reacting to the exact same thing has a very different reaction sometimes. Now men react to road rage maybe a lot more than some women, right? And so the way you react to those things is also part of your stress. You've probably talked about rest and digest versus fight or flight, right? It's all the same concept. And I'm kind of muddying the waters, but I think to simplify it, if you just focus on the biofeedback and the signals your body's telling you, the stress will also come along for the ride. So if you're doing CrossFit and you feel great afterward, fine, but look at the other signals down the rest of the day and the next day and the next week and see if it isn't exacerbated by what you're doing. And the only way you're going to know is to stop doing it, is to change your behavior and measure it. And that's where the data piece comes in.
I actually really love that. And I think that helps because there are in some cases when I work with women, I tell them to stop moving for a minute. Like when in my own health. So I don't know if you've been listening to my story, you know that I owned a gym for 12, 13 years here in Toronto. And then COVID hit, we were shut down, massive stress, obviously. And then I went back to school and I moved into functional medicine, kind of married the two worlds. But the very first thing that I needed to do was literally stop working out. Stop. All I did was walk every day. And within months, such a short period of time, I dropped 12 pounds, all the inflammation gone. I was sleeping again. My husband said, I have never seen you more vibrant. And I was like, wow, what I was doing, even though I thought it was right, even though I felt good afterward, was actually part of the problem. So I love that and maybe not everybody needs to stop for 6 months, but to just take it out for a minute to understand the data that comes with that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's like, again, going back to symptoms, it's like you'll know it when you know it. And I hate to simplify it that way, but really like stop chasing labs and everything to tell you the answer when your body's telling you the answer also. But the stress thing, cortisol, that's another thing that kind of bugs me about the industry and the overhyping of cortisol. Look, cortisol is a thing we have. It's a signal of our stress. Great. Let's stop chasing band-aids to fix our cortisol, which by the way, it's almost impossible to measure cortisol. I mean, you know how difficult it is based on how it changes throughout the day, but there are things we can do that directly affect the cortisol. You mentioned inflammation. Well, inflammation, yes, we can measure it in our labs like cytokines and interleukin-6 and all these blood markers and everything. But when you lift weights, we know that reduces your inflammation. When you eat more food, we know it reduces inflammation. When you stop sitting, we know it reduces your inflammation. And all those things then reduce your cortisol. And so there's always a tie back to cortisol. And if you want to put stress into like a simple hormonal bucket, right? It is cortisol, but you can't do anything about cortisol. You can only do things about you that affects cortisol. And that's the message I want to get through to people.
I love that. I think cortisol, and if we disagree on this next one, please let me know. Cortisol and blood sugar. Well, they affect each other. Glucose, I'll say, not just blood sugar. I am so crazy when influencers start talking about fix your cortisol. Well, your cortisol is supposed to rise. It is literally supposed to, in an ideal world, and not in a stressed world, in just a regular day, rise and set with the sun. It is tied to your circadian rhythm. It is what wakes you up in the morning, and it is supposed to get high. And then it is supposed to drop. And that's what helps you fall asleep at night. Now, when there's an inversion and, when you're so stressed that things have maybe tanked, okay, we understand that there can be dysfunction. But the same thing with your glucose. Like when you eat food, your glucose is supposed to spike. And then your pancreas is supposed to produce insulin and it's supposed to bring you back into homeostasis. These are the feedback loops that happen in your body that are supposed to happen. So everybody wearing their glucose monitor being like, I ate an apple and now my blood sugar's out of control. Well, no, It's not. Give it some time. Anyway, what's your thought on that?
So I had an episode just recently come out called Carbs Spike Insulin, and that's ideal for muscle building. And again, always come from the frame of like, if you're lifting weights versus sedentary, your body's going to use carbs in different ways. So with the blood sugar spike, it's true. I've heard people say, oh no, I stopped eating potatoes because of my blood sugar spike. I'm like, oh boy.
What a world without potatoes. Oh my gosh.
And somebody asked me what I think about CGMs in the past. I'm like, yeah, I don't use them. None of my clients use them. The only people I know who benefit greatly from them are type 1 diabetics and maybe type 2 diabetics too. But even type 2 diabetics can live a certain way where they never need to measure it. Type 1 have to they could die, right? So when I think of blood sugar spikes, let's go back to symptoms again. If you are having constant energy crashes, it could be because you're having massive variation in your blood sugar, which in and of itself isn't necessarily bad thing. That's your pancreas producing insulin in response to the sugar in your blood that is trying to partition back into your cells. And so the more variation you have, which tends to happen when you don't have balanced meals, when you eat a lot of like carbs in one meal, but then protein the next meal, and you're all over the place with your timing, when you're not walking to kind of open those GLUT4 transporters, right, to take the blood out, the sugar out. And when you're not lifting weights, you're going to have those massive things. And that could be explaining your crashes in energy. Now, what's the solution? Well, just better manage your lifestyle to handle it. That's it. Like it's not, you don't need a blood sugar fix or CGM. That's my thoughts on that. It's like a super simple thing. And when I talk to type 1 diabetics about it, they kind of laugh at non-diabetics measuring this stuff.
Well, yeah, I just like, it literally comes back to stop chasing the one thing you think is going to fix it all for you and just come back to the basics. Lift, eat well, eat your whole foods. It can be fruit. It can be potatoes. It can be protein. Like stop with the ultra processed food, get the sleep, start tuning into your body. I love that you said stop chasing labs. And I use labs. I use labs on every one of my clients.
Use them, but don't chase them. Yeah, exactly.
But don't chase them. Exactly. You cannot chase one marker and expect that to be the thing to get your body composition different. No, it is going back to the basics and tuning in to the messages your body is saying to you. I love that.
Yeah, it's a back and forth. And with the labs, like again, it's a lagging indicator. So if you fix something over here, you measure it over here. Testosterone is a big one. I did an episode recently about how do you boost testosterone naturally. And for a lot of people, it's not really boosting it so much as avoiding the suppression of testosterone via too much body fat, not enough movement, not enough lifting, all the same exact things. And so like if I have a male client who's worried about his free testosterone being 500, put all these practices in place, all of a sudden at 600, there you go. And if that's still not high enough, then maybe you need TRT, right? And that's kind of where my mind goes. Now, the blood sugar thing is, so for the ladies listening, right? If you want to eat more carbs, assuming we've busted the myth, maybe we haven't yet, that carbs are not bad for you and they don't cause you to gain fat, because they don't. Carbs are awesome.
So good.
We could talk about it. But if you want to eat more, building muscle is the best way to do that, because during training, your body is going to suck it up like a sponge. It's going to suck up that sugar in your blood. And then your muscles are going to have what's called cytokines that are like signaling molecules that go out and lead to all these other positive things we talked about. Then as your body adapts to that strength session, and it will use more glucose. Then to recover the next day, it's going to use more glucose. And then by having more muscle, you're constantly using more glucose. In other words, you could eat a shit ton more carbs by building muscle. Okay.
And I got to say, what isn't like potato? I can't believe somebody would want to give up potato. They're like the best food ever.
Potato, oats, fruit, like that's what we mean by carbs, right? We're not talking about pizza and donuts. I mean, you can fit those in a little bit here and there, but that's not what we're talking about when we say carbs.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I just did a podcast episode with somebody who wholeheartedly believes in the keto diet. And I learned some really incredible things, but like, I don't want to measure out 6 blueberries. You know what I mean? Like in the summertime, I want to eat however many blueberries I want to eat. You know what I mean?
Man, if you talked to me 3 or 4 years ago, I would be super hard against certain things. And I'm still, I don't like keto and carnivore because of how restrictive they are. But there's a little part of this where I want people to find out for themselves why something might make them feel a certain way. In other words, I don't want to gaslight people who say, I went on carnivore and all of a sudden all my problems went away, my gut issues went away, I feel great. That's true for you. That happened. But now we need to understand why. Was it one food that you could just eliminate and then eat everything else? Or do you have a general insensitivity to like all gluten containing products or all whatever? Do you have a histamine issue? And that's where the engineering part is really cool, because then you don't have to leave those things out. You could do an elimination diet, which is a great process for some of the stuff. You probably use it, I'm guessing, but and then you reintroduce things one at a time. And then don't assume YouTube commenters, YouTube haters, that just because I'm poo-pooing keto for muscle building, because the evidence shows that it's inferior for muscle building, doesn't mean you can't eat keto if it works for you. Please go right ahead.
100%. I love that you like kind of walk the middle of the line. I very
Yeah.
much walk the middle of the line in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like everything that we are talking about right now is so bio individual,
Yeah.
and people
It's
need to
nuanced.
stop listening to the influencers, to the, this worked for me, so this is definitely going to work for you kind of feedback, because that's just not true. Like you said, somebody might have a histamine issue, but we need to ask why. You know what I mean? So maybe doing keto for a little while to really bring that down or whatever. Cool. But really at the end of the day, is
Yeah.
it sustainable?
And one thing, and here's the thing, like if a coach or podcaster you're listening to doesn't have some humility, like that they don't know everything, like unfollow. Because sometimes I state things strongly, but I try to add nuance. But other times I'm like, wow, I didn't even know this. Like I've been studying nutrition science for years, and this new thing came up because of a client or listener or whatever. For example, recently, my coach, assistant coach, who used to be a client of mine. I mean, I know everything about her at this point. And she's on like thyroid meds and she has hormone stuff she goes through. She discovered that I think butyrate is the compound inside resistant starch. Am I getting that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a connection with her sleep and that specific nutrient, even though there's not really an easy way to measure deficiency in it. But she started to have more resistant starch like potatoes and cooled rice. And it was starting to help her. And then I started to connect that with someone else who I thought was like cockamamie weird ideas a year ago, who was like, have you ever tried just cold carbs? Like, I don't eat hot carbs anymore. I'm like, what's she talking about? And my gut reaction was like, no, the evidence shows that it's all the same. I looked into it. I'm like, you know what? There's something to be said about like these weird little compounds and things in foods and fruits and vegetables that can affect people differently. And nutrition is very complex. So the only way to figure it out is to figure it out for you.
Yes.
Going back to the bio individual thing.
100%. I'm glad you said that. And it gets really overblown. Like you said, women who are in peri and postmenopause, they are a lot of times really desperate to feel better. And when they resonate with somebody online who gives them one solution, they get blind and they just start seeing, I gotta chase glucose levels, I gotta chase cortisol levels, I gotta chase this diet, that diet, whatever. And really at the end of the day, it comes down to your biofeedback. It comes down to what your body needs, and you need to start tuning into that and stop looking at the external. And like you said, if you're following or working with a coach who can't understand that there is nuance and just differences in people, that's probably not the right coach for you.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, it's hard to find it's even hard to say you should trust one person in the world anyway, right? Like we all have a team of people across the spectrum. Like that's why you and I bring people on our show who have a certain lane that they're really expert in. My lane is not hormone replacement therapy, but I know a ton about it working with people, and I can refer you and I can like work with it. Same thing with GLP-1s. Like I welcome you with open arms. If you're on tirzepatide and you want to like know how to change your lifestyle, let's work together, because you may be surprised at your ability to maybe titrate it down or come off of it. Or maybe you do need it because you have strong appetite signaling and we can work around that. So yeah, you got to have like a team of really good people you find.
I love that. Well, Philip, tell us where people can find you, because I mean, if you've got the team, people are looking. So tell us where people can find you.
Yeah, definitely check out the podcast first, because we have 3 episodes a week. It's going down to 2 soon. Check out the podcast, Wits and Weights. And then I think the best thing would be to check out, I have a few free guides, but we should give one of the free ones about strength training for hormone health. I think that's a good one because it's kind of an introduction to the training part of it, but linked to the longevity and health piece.
Love it.
So I will give you a link to that.
Perfect.
But if anybody wants to go to witsandweights.com/free, you'll find a whole bunch of guides there anyway.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Philip. Is there anything else that you want to say to the audience today?
I guess the last thought is, if you are a woman like over 40 and the world is telling you that everything is going to hell in a handbasket from here on out, this can actually be the best phase of your life, because the things that all your peers are not doing, the simple things like lifting weights, are going to completely change your life. I mean, they're going to completely put you in the elite that is separate from the audience everyone's talking about. And just following Michele here and listening to what she's talking about with your metabolism and like putting in place your lowest hanging fruit. Like, what's the one thing that you're not doing? And maybe it's lifting weights. You go after it and get the help you need. Like, if you can't get it done and 45 days from now, you look back and you're like, oh, I didn't do what I committed to. There's a way to get it done. There's a way to put that behavior in place. So seek out the help, seek out the support. And this is a great place to start.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Philip. I had such a great time today, and I look forward to all the links, and I'll make sure that they're in the show notes.
Me too, Michele. Michele's going to be on our show. So that's another reason to follow Wits Weights.
Amazing. Yeah, we're recording tomorrow, your show, and I'm excited for that
That's right.
conversation too.